I just love that intro. I am excited to be here. This is our weekly live, so we're going to see you guys hopping into the chat here in a second. Pay attention because today we're talking about pick one or maybe two.
Three. How about three?
Don't go crazy and start playing
three.
Every major scenario, right? Don't like most people get stuck in the world of prep because they're like, oh, I gotta prepare for an EMP, I gotta prepare for nuke, I gotta prepare for economic downturn. And it's the crazy thing is the 80-20 rule applies so perfectly to prepping. If you're not familiar with the 80-20 rule, it's that 20% of the workforce will get you 80% of the results. Same thing in prepping. 20% of your gear will cover 80% of the scenarios. Like, knowledge is more important than gear, first of all. If you know how to do things, you're going to go a lot farther. So tonight we want to just kind of help bring you back to the ground floor. We've had a ton of people responding to one of my videos that I did recently on TikTok, and they're like, well, where do I start? And there's just so many things to prepare for, and I'm freaking out. And it's like, always bring it back to like your primary fear and charge at that fear and destroy that fear. That's why you prep, so that you don't have that fear anymore. Like, for example, me, I primarily am prepping for job loss long term or a disability. Like, it kind of falls into this category. It'll cover economic, it'll cover job loss, it'll cover disability, it'll cover losing a spouse, right? Those are the things that I primarily, that's one category. So I focus on that. But guess what? My secondary I've picked is an EMP, which falls into the same category pretty much as a nuke, because they could both have a lot of the same results, same resulting failures, grid going down. Obviously with a nuke, then you've got all of the radiation and everything else. But with an EMP, you'll have a lot of the same problems from a nuke as far as grid failures, supply chain falling apart, and everything else. Just no nuclear problems.
And if you live next to a nuclear facility, that might be higher on your list, right?
Right. So look at what's around you and pick one. It's like, have you guys seen Moana?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When they get down into the lair of Tamatoa, and Tamatoa is like talking to Moana, and she's like looking at his eyeballs, and he's like, pick one, babe, because it's messing with him.
You can tell Scott has kids, right?
Right?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Young ones too.
Young kids.
We watch so many Disney flicks. It's
awesome.
Devastating. But it's so funny because it's like, yeah, pick one. Start with one.
Yes. So
and go from there.
My list, one of them on my list is natural disaster. And because of where we live in Utah, I live pretty much right on the fault, which is really the best place to live in an earthquake. So that's one of my three. I have three. I don't just have two, Scott. I picked three. So
that's fine too. But start with one. Did you start with all three?
I've been doing this for a long time, Scott. I didn't start. I didn't start saying exactly. I didn't start saying, well, I'm going to prepare for this. I just, I didn't know what I was doing. Right. It took a long time to figure out, okay, where am I going to focus? And then where do I go from here? So, it was a shotgun approach, I guess you could say, when I first started. Is okay, what are my biggest concerns? So my number one on the list, my first one, and which is really what I wouldn't say inspired me to get into silver and precious metals and such, was financial collapse, the financial condition of our country. So that's one of my three scenarios that I'm preparing for. And when I started to really wake up, that's the thing that really caught my attention and where I focused a lot of time, because, well, for a lot of reasons, haven't always been very financially well off for most of my adult life, I guess you could say, just living paycheck to paycheck for a lot of years. And I wanted to change that. So that was part of that. Like you're saying, prepare for financial stability and, job loss, those types of things. So that's my number one. That's where I started out.
What's funny is like, you could take any other scenario, like an EMP or or earthquake or nuke. And if you prepare for that, you're also preparing for financial crisis, job loss, like loss of a loved one. Like a lot of those same things are covered. It goes back to the 80-20 rule, right? It's have you guys ever heard of I think it's called the Price's Law?
Yep.
Same. I shared a video with you, Paris, I think. But
yeah.
Price's Law, it's phenomenal. And it's the inverse. So the root of whatever the number is of your workforce, like it's the best way to really display it is in like sales, like a sales organization. So if you have 9 sales reps, the root of 9 is 3. Right. So it's the square inverse law, basically. I don't know the terminology is probably a little off. But if you've got 9 sales reps, 3 are going to be the ones that are doing
most of the business.
The like half of the revenue comes from those 3.
Yeah.
Right. So then if you have, say, 16, half of your revenue comes from those 4 people. So just like the 80-20 rule, Price's Law is like a small set of variables will basically take care of a huge group of things.
Yeah. So I guess what you really have to determine in your area where you live is what are those things. I think financial collapse would probably be in there for everybody in the United States or in the world, because that's going to affect everybody, right? But not necessarily an earthquake or a natural disaster.
One of the things
live in the Midwest, maybe it's tornadoes. Sure.
When I first got started, I was more of an end of the world zombie apocalypse type of scenario. But then as I kind of settled down from that, because I read the book of Revelations and some of those other things, and I was like, what the heck, dude, we're screwed. And so I was like, I got to scramble to do something. But then I realized, a couple of things. One is that, like you guys said, so for me, as a financial planner, one of the things we talk about and share with our clients is to set aside 3 to 6 months worth of an emergency fund. And I thought to myself, when you have cash sitting in a bank account that's your emergency fund, what are you going to use it for? You're going to use it for if you lost your job. You're going to use it for if you had, some type of situation where that's the typical reason why to have a 3 to 6 months is because if you lose your job, it'll take you about 3 or 4 months to find a new job that's equal. So to me, I was like, well, if I'm going to use that money to buy food, why not just have food storage and then have the cash for the other things? And so to me, food storage became just like you were saying, Scott, is that food storage, the idea or desire for food storage, that 90-day pantry, that became the key thing. If anything happens to my financial situation, I can at least feed my family. And then, of course, natural disasters. I lived in California, and there's always threat of earthquakes and fires, and so it was like get a go bag. So the next thing I wanted to do was make sure I had my go bag, and then and now that I'm kind of tempering out and kind of being more realistic, I think that this is going to be a long-term lifestyle for me, and I really want to be able to do that. But I think the very first things I wanted to do was make sure that I had enough food that in case anything happened, I could at least feed my family. And then the second thing was to have a go bag in case of an emergency, so that we knew we at least had some of the tools and gear we needed to survive in the event of like an earthquake or a fire or something where we had to grab and just go. And those were the 2 things I started with.
It's funny because like I evolved from like I was a 72-hour kid. That's what I grew up on. And I'm like, oh, okay, we all have it. Like my parents had it. We had our year supply of food. We had a surplus of water, but it wasn't just food. I always say year supply of food, a year supply of food and soaps, hygiene, all that was covered, and then when sales would come, my mom would always buy extra socks and underwear for us kids. So that we always had it on stock. Right. It's funny though, like as I've grown up, I've evolved. Like, I don't like bug out bags. I love bags. I love kits. I don't like the psychology of a bug out bag, I think is what I dislike so much about it. I like purpose driven bags, but bug out, the terminology of it always, I cringe. Like, where are you going? I'm going to go to the wilderness and I'll survive. I'm like, with what skills?
Exactly.
Like, most brand new, like, oh man, I have so many bad stories. One of my good friends, he went on a boat trip fishing on a canoe just back in July. His name is Mikhail, and you guys are probably, well, Shane, I know you've met him, Emberlit. He makes these amazing tiny little stoves, backpacking gear, survival gear. He goes to Rabbit Stick all the time. But he had an amazing story this summer where he, as a survival expert, didn't have an adequate life preserver on and fell in the water. It was 40 degrees. And he was in there for over 2 hours, or no, for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
And he couldn't, the funny thing is like, if your brain's working in that scenario, he should have dropped his pants out, tied the legs together, blown it up to a better life preserver, right? Those are the things you learn in Boy Scouts, things like that. But like when you're in the panic in the moment, he's got this little tiny preserver that's not doing anything. He's keeping this much of his face out of the water. The rest of him's under. And so he just spent basically 2 hours kicking to try to get to shore. And it was dark. It was nighttime at this point. So like he's just trying to track off the moon to get out. Eventually he got out. He was fine. Some people were able to come and rescue him, and they thought he'd be dead when they found him. And so when he's talking to him, they're like, "Oh my God, what? Oh my gosh, you're alive!" Like any scenario can go sideways really fast,
especially if you're by yourself, right?
And he has he has years of experience. He's an amazing fisherman. He's got tons of knowledge. But when you're in like that moment, your brain can crap out, right? So it's better to prepare. He's like, I should have bought a better life preserver. I bought the cheapest, dingiest one I could get at Walmart because I was like, oh, I better have one just in case. He's like, and it wasn't even rated correctly. It was the wrong size. It was the wrong rating. He's a big guy. I'm like, dude, if you'd have had just a good life preserver, you'd have been fine. He's like, I could have stayed buoyant. I could have easily got to the shoreline. But it's the same thing for our preps. Like if you're not taking it seriously and you buy something garbage, expect garbage results, right? If you're not practicing the knowledge that you're learning for these scenarios, what's the point? Learning is useless without repetition, without actually doing. If you're not doing it,
sets.
Right? It's like going to the gym. I can't go to the gym and get bigger if I don't actually lift weights consistently and have a routine that I've developed, with an expert to help me get bigger. Or I'm not going to lose the weight by watching somebody else work out. Oh, my grandparents are my parents or my grandparents or my brother's prepping. So, I'll just go to their house when things go sideways. I don't think so.
Yeah,
no one's coming to my house. Not without an invite. Like you got to start and you got to do. Get your feet wet. Get your hands dirty in prepping. Like pick your scenarios and start. And when I started, I was 72 hours. I was all about the 72-hour kits. When I moved out, I had worked up to a 6-month supply when I was living on my own. But it was always like I learned quickly 72 hours wasn't long enough. So I bumped it up to 96 minimum. And then I ditched a lot of those ideas. And my bag went from this big, heavy 50-pound bag. I've got like a 20-pound bag now.
Nice.
And it's like you don't need everything that they try to sell you.
Yeah, I had recently had somebody ask me, they said, hey, I want to get into prepping. I know I need to do it. I'm thinking about buying a freeze dryer. And I was like, oh, do you think it's a good idea to buy a freeze dryer? And I'm like, yes, actually, I think it's a good idea to buy a freeze dryer if you have everything already in place before that. So I said, do you have your 90-day pantry? No. Do you have, a couple 100 gallons of water storage somewhere? No. Then don't save up and waste all that time saving up to buy a freeze dryer. Start buying things now to get your food storage in place. I mean, there's some scenarios like you were saying, Scott, there's about 20% of the work that you do will cover 80% of the scenarios that are out there. And one of the first scenarios you absolutely have to do is get food and water. And if you have food and water, you're going to be good to go. And then start thinking about, okay, what are the different dangers that are in my area? Is it a tornado? Is it like earthquake? And then prepare for those things. Just that first.
Right.
Once you have your food done and your water's done, and you have one of those scenarios, taken care of, then you can move on to the next scenario. But don't get overwhelmed with trying to plan for every scenario right when you're getting out of the gate. Take food for sure, 90-day pantry for sure, and then continue to work on expanding that to 6 months and to a year with more staple stuff. Not the rotation stuff should be about 90 days. That's it. But then rice and beans and those wheat and those types of things can take you out to a year easily. And then get your water, and then from there, you'll grow into it. You'll evolve. Like Shane talks about this all the time, the evolution of prepping. When you first start, focus in on the one or two things, and then once those are taken care of, now you can move to the next 2 or 3 or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and I think the freeze dryer scenario that could serve someone very well if they love to cook, they have a lot of recipes. You can use that to build your pantry. You can build that your long-term food storage as well. Of course, that's going to be unique for everybody, whether that makes a lot of sense, because that is a big investment. You could take $3,000-$4,000 and buy a lot of food storage with it, or you can use that to prepare very inexpensive food storage, making it yourself. So there's a lot of decisions that way. But you go back to picking 1 or 2 or 3 different scenarios to prep for. Of course, I think in everyday life, most people are not concerned about food storage because we've got the store right there for us. But we're all concerned about being able to pay the bills, right? Most people live paycheck to paycheck. I think it's at this point it's over 60%. Am I right, Paris? Of right. Americans, it's over 60% who don't have $400 or $1,000 in savings. And part of preparing for hard times, for emergency, is your own personal financial collapse or the actual financial collapse of the country. And one thing I preach all the time, we talked about in the last show, is becoming our own bank. That's part of my preparedness for financial collapse. Disconnecting from the system and becoming your own bank. And what that means is, to me, is this, right? Is having precious metals. The things that the banks used to be, where our dollar was, it came from. It sprouted from it. The dollar came because it was a receipt for gold or silver, and so that's where, like you say, just doing a few small things, very simple. I mean, having gold and silver, that's pretty simple. It takes time. It's not easy, but just doing that can protect you from a whole horde of problems that are out there right now, from your own, from losing a job to the country going bankrupt. So very simple things that you can do to protect from a whole wide of variety of circumstances, particularly with becoming your own bank and controlling your financial future that way.
What's interesting is, like, people talk about how prepping is too expensive, because of their finances. Right now, everyone has really bad finance. Well, I wouldn't say 60%, right? We just talked about 60% don't have a savings of more than $400, right?
I think, well, the statistic is that it's actually 56% of Americans can't cover $1,000 emergency expense, which is about the same thing. I mean, you give or take a few nuances there. It's pretty much that's the same concept.
And I guess it depends on which statistics you're looking at as well, right?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But the point is like, look at what it costs to go to the store, right? Eggs are crazy. Well, don't buy more eggs, right? Instead of buying more eggs, buy more wheat. Buy. We just had case lot sales 2 months ago in my town, and I could get peaches, cans of peaches. Peaches are delicious, and there's water in the can, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess how much I could save? I was saving $1 per can. They're normally $1.43. You can get them for 44 cents a can.
Nice.
If you buy 12 cans or more. And I'm like, done. So I bought 4 cases. That's what it is. It's like you wait for things to go on sale. You save up for things when they go on sale, and you buy more of them, right? Don't go use your credit card to buy your food storage. Like, when the crap's hitting the fan, then go use your credit card to buy stuff. Max it out the day before the disaster.
And what you're talking about is
when that is
exactly like what Paris teaches in cost averaging in, right? Where you're buying low, you're buying high, you're buying in the middle, and you're all averaging out. And this works the same for food as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and, my other scenario that I came up with that I felt would fit this 80-20 rule is called WROL. Who knows what that stands for? WROL.
World renowned. I don't know.
Without rule of law.
Oh,
without rule of law. So my three scenarios are financial collapse, natural disaster, which specifically here in Utah is
primarily earthquake.
It's primarily earthquake, but it could be flooding. It could be lots of different things. And then without rule of law. So obviously that covers a very wide right, and that could also cover zombies, zombie apocalypse or Paris, without rule of law. Certain things you need to have for both situations. Having the need to protect yourself and your family and your preps from the zombies, which most people are going to be acting like zombies, right?
Well, shoot, have you seen a teenager lose Wi-Fi? They freak out and go like animalistic,
or
crazy.
Misplace their device, their phone, misplace that, and like can't find or not.
Well, a couple of
lose connection to the internet, right?
A couple of my other inspirations were, the movie Red Dawn. I think that is one of preparedness. Anybody who's into preparedness has been inspired by Red Dawn,
the original, not the remake.
Yeah, the OG. And then another thing that kind of inspired me, because I didn't really dive into prepping until about 2014, 2018. I mean, that's where I was like, I'm full blown. I'm doing this. Let's go for it. And that was 3 or 4 seasons into The Walking Dead. And, you start watching The Walking Dead and you're like, wait a minute, man, this is let's say that the world doesn't end the way they predicted in that show, but there certainly seems like a lot of people right now are doing some pretty dumb things that are zombie-like. Mm-hmm. And so we had an episode about this. You can't save stupid. You can't save dumb. Like, to me, an invasion is entirely possible. More often than not, an economic collapse. So that's where you've got to determine, and that's everybody's going to have a different set of hierarchy of values of what they're going to start to prep their preps for. But for me, it was those things like, oh my gosh, if I lose my job or if I have a financial collapse in my own personal life, how am I going to feed the kids? Then it was, if a natural disaster hits, I need to grab and go. And I'll be honest with you, after that, it's going to be, things like Walking Dead, zombie apocalypse, or / invasions, or just being prepared. And then it's grown on me to the point where now just the lifestyle of being self-reliant is so, it just expands into other things. Now I'm working on getting my Second Amendment skills up. I'm working on doing some things where I want to be able to do some martial arts and help protect myself physically. But then one of my goals is to also start doing wilderness survival, learning how to survive in the wilderness, because I don't want to grab and go into the wilderness and I'm one of those statistics like Scott's talking about. Then I'm like, yeah, I got my go bag. I'm in the wilderness. Woohoo!
You just need to watch Rambo in Rambo 2, a couple of times.
I'm
Rambo
dead
3.
a week later. I don't want to
what's funny is like we live in Utah. And Utah has some of the best hunting grounds in and around it, some of the best places to fish. So like there's a ton of resources, right? Yeah. But there's more people than resources. And what's funny is when I first started PrepperCon before I sold it, people were like, "Oh man, that's so cool. Yeah. If things go sideways, I'm going into the woods." And I'm like, "Really? Wow, you must have a lot of training." And they're like, "Huh? Like, do you have training? Like, do you know how to build a fire?" They're like, "Well, yeah, I can start a fire." I'm like, "No, but can you build a fire in the woods? Do you know what burns and what doesn't? Do you know how to keep things dry in the woods? Do you have a shelter? Do you have a cabin you're going to go to?" "Well, no." I'm like, "Okay, how are you going to get food?" "Well, we've got rifles." I'm like, "Oh, you're seasoned hunters?" "Well, no." I'm like, "Okay. So you're going to go out into the woods, die, and someone else is going to find your stuff, and you're going to be just this wonderful person who got them the stuff they needed."
Yeah, you just donated your stuff.
You just donated everything you think you can go into the woods with. The reality is if you don't have the skills, you will not survive that. You can't just have no skills and go into the woods these days and be successful.
Too many people playing video games, Go out, get on that, and just go out and onto the game board, right? Go out into the field there and into the world, and oh look, all of a sudden it just pops up what you need, right? And you walk over there and you get oh look, there's a gun, and it just doesn't work that way.
What's the number one killer in the wild?
And there's no restart or regeneration button.
Exactly. You get one chance,
number one killer? You're done. Is it a bear?
Exposure.
It's exposure, right?
Yeah.
3 hours in extreme heat or 3 hours in extreme cold. That's the number one killer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, people don't think about that. And so they don't have the right gear. Like, okay, what if the crap hits the fan in the middle of the winter? You're going to go hike into the snow and die? Like, you're going to freeze to death. So there we go. Whited outdoors. Thank you very much. We're going to show that. When they say they go into the woods, it's always sunny and 70.
Right?
That's
what we imagine.
Like, idyllic scenario. Like, I started out when I was a kid. I got geeked out about survival when I was 11 years old. I wanted to move out of my home and into the woods because I read a book, My Side of the Mountain. And this kid left, and it's a book. It's not a real true story. It's a book. It's a novel. He went into the woods and he lived on his own in this hollowed out tree, and he survived.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd go into town and read survival books and like how to do things in the woods from the local library, and then he'd hike back out and do these things. And I'm like, I'm leaving, I'm moving, I'm going to the woods. And my mom's like, whoa. Thankfully, she was able to get me into Boy Scouts the next year. And I learned a ton of stuff. And I was geeked out about the survival training. Wilderness Survival Merit Badge was my most excited merit badge that I ever got. Still to this day, it's the best. But I also geeked out a ton on the Emergency Prep merit badge.
Sorry, the coin collecting merit badge is the coolest. Sorry.
For you.
Totally joking, totally kidding. But I wanted to I guess talk about that without rule of law. That covers, like you were saying, Paris, you started to talk about alien
invasion.
Invasion in particular. Yeah, you talked about invasion. I guess it could be an alien invasion. It seems like our government's setting us up for that anyway. But
Jeff Heiner says Battlefield Earth seems probable too, where aliens take over.
Exactly. That's where I was
about to hit the share button too. I'm like, yep, we got to talk about that.
But that also covers where we're seeing rumors of civil war is going to break out, right? We know that gangs are more and more of a big problem. All of the illegal aliens coming in, and crime is increasing because of the situation we're in, because of inflation and all these things that we could go into for hours. But that's the reason why I picked without rule of law, WROL. But there's also EROL, excessive rule of law, which is also kind of where we're at right now as well. We're seeing this this excessive legislation and lawmaking and rulemaking and
tyranny
being made by tyranny, exactly, being made by those who have no authority and unelected, right? So
and the sad thing is no real experience in that.
Exactly.
No true knowledge of how things really work.
Just the money got them there somehow.
So speaking of invasions, I mean, if you think about, I don't know if you've ever read that or watched that video about that guy who was a KGB agent talking. He says, in a couple generations, all we have to do is get the American people to whatever. And he goes through this whole process of just demoralizing the American people to the point where we're willing to take whatever we give up our freedoms for safety and security, which we talked about a couple podcasts ago. But then you think about how many acres of land do the Chinese own in the United States?
In the United States. And how many businesses as well?
How many businesses do they own? In fact, I don't know if you know, I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and the guy on there was talking about how this whole absolutely idiotic situation going on with the gas stoves came because some Chinese people were like, it's somehow it's bad emissions in the air, somewhere or another. And so we're listening, like the people who are saying we got to ban gas stoves now are getting their direction from Chinese
who are the worst polluters in the world.
And they're not banning their gas stoves, I'll tell you that. But now America's like, oh yeah, we're good. So is an invasion where they pull up with their boats and march onto the beach with their guns? That's one version of an invasion. I think we're being invaded right now politically and morally, like invaded by just being bombarded with all this crazy stuff. So invasions are, unfortunately, it's a slow boil that we're in right now. And that's one of we talked about that a couple of episodes ago about the idea of making sure we're staying aware of what's really going on in the world, so that we're preparing properly as things happen to us and around us.
And there's plenty of rumors of the UN, of United Nations, actually already being in the country and ready to invade, if you want to call it that, or ready to kind of take power as things fall into chaos. So I consider that in the same category without rule of law.
Well, what's interesting is, like, if you look at everything from the biblical point of view, right? Jump into Revelations, jump into Daniel, jump into Isaiah, and you'll see what are some of the factors that have to happen before the apocalypse. Wars and rumors of wars, right? Men will be lovers of their own selves. I have never seen a more narcissistic society than what we see today. People are absolutely in love with themselves. The dating world, I am so glad I am married, because the horror stories I hear from my niece,
I know. It's horrible.
I'm just like, what? Gaslighting everywhere, like, it's just ghosting. It's crazy. And people are so in love with themselves, and they want everyone else to change or cater to them. And it's like, dude, what? It's crazy. So we're like on the edge. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to become more self-reliant. Whatever disasters you've picked, right? Focus on those till you get to yourself to a position where you've got some self-reliance. This may not come across the right way, but there's a movie, and I can't remember what movie it is, but there's a quote, and the guy's like, you need to get to a position where you have FU money. And it's, you get to that position. He's like, $2.5 million, get you to the position where you can buy a house in the suburbs, nothing flashy. You've got a car, nice, reliable POS, and you can do whatever you want. And if you don't like working for somebody, goodbye. If you don't like a deal someone's trying to give you, goodbye. You don't have to be part of it, right? Well, we don't have that option. We have to fix things. And a lot of times people are afraid to do something because they'll lose what they have. Right? We're losing what we have already. We have to do something now. You have to put your plans in place. You have to start grouping with other people like us who are trying to make a change. You have to start taking a stand, because no one's going to come save you. The only person that will ever come save you is Jesus. And he's saving you from sin, not from stupidity.
Well, that's, yeah.
Right? He's giving us a second chance through grace. Like, you can't fix stupid. And as much as we preach and teach and help and share, like, there are people that are never going to get it, and they just won't.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are getting it and you're like, I've got to do something, start standing up. Equally, start getting better prepared. Focus on the scenarios that you're worried about so you can eliminate those fears.
Here's a thought.
I peace in preparedness.
Yeah, here's a thought that just came to me that you inspired there, Scott, is that I should be preparing for the flood. I should be preparing just like Noah did, right? I should be, if I'm building an ark, all my list is covered, right? Although now it's going to be the fire instead of the flood, right? But how do I prepare for the fire, right? And if I'm preparing for that one thing, it's going to cover everything else. Am I totally off in left field here?
No, I think you're exactly right.
Taking
responsibility is critical. You're the only one. I mean, none of us can get off of this. None of us can make it without Christ, like you shared, Scott. That's absolutely true. However, one of the things that I want people to realize, and I think that even Christ is in his teachings very clearly, is that he wants to create leaders. His goal is to create leaders and to develop people to the point where they can do, because he says, what manner of men ought ye to be, even as I am? What things ought ye to do? The things which ye have seen me do. He's not trying to be the guy that's like, he's not trying to be the leader and subordinate us. He wants us to rise up and be like him and to do the same things he's doing. And so that's leadership. That's humble leadership. And it's realizing that, you know what, there's people out there that we need to help, but there's strengths that we need to develop and we need to be strong. And so if you're feeling like you need to prepare, the key thing is to not get overwhelmed. Don't get to the point where you're frustrated or in the paralysis of analysis, as they say. Just take a deep breath and say, okay, what do I need to do to start? If you haven't started yet, that's going to be food and water. After that, it's going to be a go bag in case anything happens, or then start working on whether or not you're going to stay in your house, whether or not you're going to leave. What you just got to start working one step at a time. And before you know it, you're Shane. And you've got 5 million things, and they got the coolest list of inventory of everything. But the idea is to start and just go and just build from those foundational things.
I definitely have too much of an obsession with stuff, right?
Every time we talk about something, you're like, "Oh yeah, you mean this?" And you bring it in front of the camera. And I'm like, "What the heck? How does Shane have everything we talk about?"
Well, because his office is in his bunker.
That's right.
If he had one, you know.
If I had
here's
one.
the thing,
right.
like we talk about it, like, you know, someday I'll be humbled to be called out like Shane is, being so prepared, right? I went to a training. I've been prepping indefinitely. My life has been all about prepping, whether I knew it or not, just because of how I grew up. But I went to a training last night and I learned a ton. And I'm like, I know a crap ton, but I learned a lot of things. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And it's like, guys, everyone watching this, everyone listening to this, like, stop thinking I'm going to go get better prepared and start doing it. Sharpen the mind, load up the mind. If you're like, I can't afford to do anything. Well, guess what? You can afford to go to the freaking library and check out some books. You can afford to hop on your computer or go to the library and use their internet and do some research, right? Get in our group, download the stuff we've provided. We've got ways to get organized. We've got food storage and water calculators. We've got go bag content kits, like lists of all the things you could possibly need. They're all in our group. They're all on our website, preppertalkradio.com. Like, go there and utilize those resources. We put them there to help you get figured out, like, which priority is the most important thing for me to prep for, and focus on that first. But like anything else, like, never stop learning. The best experts in any field realize and recognize that they don't know everything, and they're always learning. So make that your number one focus in everything you do prep wise. Keep learning, keep studying, keep practicing. And really, like, if you're not running drills, if you're not doing a fire drill at home with your wife and kids or whoever else lives in the household with you, like, it's not going to be ingrained to know what to do. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I just found out from a firefighter is, like, if you get your kids and you do this drill every day for 3 days, they've got it. That's all it takes. Cool. But if you do it once a year, you're starting from zero the next year. But if you do it for 3 days, they've got it. And then if you do it in a year, guess what? They're still going to have it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and along those same lines, Scott, is that what I've found the best way to learn is to teach, right? Then you really realize how much you don't know and how much you still need to learn. So, you know, by being here and then really trying to, when we prepare for a topic like this, I'll dig in and it's like, wow, I didn't know that, or things open up, windows open up, and my mind opens up to really learning more and discovering, you know, how much I don't really know about a particular subject.
So I'm going to admit something here real quick, if that's okay with everybody. One of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast again with you two specifically, was because I was selfishly wanting to learn. I mean, Scott, you're Mr. Preppercon, dude. Like who? I didn't know anybody that was more cool in the prepper world than that. I was like, I didn't know anything. Like, that was the pinnacle. That was then I met Shane, and Shane was like, Shane was equally right there. And I'm like, dude, these guys are going to teach me. And so I'm going to just come on here. Like, sometimes I come on here and I'm like, dude, I feel like an imposter a little bit because you two guys are so awesome. And I'm like, I was just trying to be it was in 2014, and I was reading about the last days in the scriptures. And I was like, dude, invasions, wars, zombies. I'm like, I'm screwed. If anything happens right now, I'm screwed. What do I got to do? And that's when I started getting into food and bug out bags and all that stuff. And then I was like, I got to meet the next guy who can teach me. And PrepperCon came up, Scott, Shane. And now I'm like a kid in a candy store in the prepper world when it comes to being on a podcast with the two of you guys. It's like, woohoo, I'm learning tons. I love it.
Yeah, you and I were talking the other day that I pretty much ruined you. We ruined you in that you walk into Costco and you say, and you call me about fire extinguishers. Like
I did, yep.
And like now, how many should I get? Should I get 4, 5, 6? That's an exaggeration, but your eyes get opened up and then you see how much stuff you need. And so that's still my fault, is that, 1 is none, 2 is 1. And then you see everything you need. Like I need 2, and then I need some for my kids and I need some for my neighbors. And it's a sickness, I don't know how else to describe it. So
what I just realized in all of this, thank you for this realization, Paris. So I'm a gateway drug. I am like, because I introduced you to Shane, right? People find me and they find prepping and they're like, oh, Scott knows a lot. Oh, prepping is awesome. Like they go from me to like, oh yeah, to everything else.
Their eyes get
I'm
open,
the prepping
right?
gateway drug.
Once your eyes get open, you can't close them again.
True.
You can't go backwards from this.
But it's so true. Like if you don't try to teach somebody else, that's why if you're a parent, you've got a huge advantage in prepping, because you go start teaching your kids and now all of a sudden it so well. And man, kids retain a lot of information. The younger they are, the better. They are going to retain that knowledge. Things I know, a lot of stuff I can do, and my capabilities and skills all came from what my parents taught me. Like my wife will admit this, I'm a better cook in our household than her. I have more experience cooking, partially because I'm older, but also because my mom made me cook once or twice a week for the whole family. I'd have to cook dinner from the time I was about 10, 11 years old, all the way till I graduated and moved out. I had to cook at least one meal a week. And even after I moved out and came back, I went on a mission. After the 2 years, I came back and immediately my mom's like, all right, you're home. Cool. What day are you cooking? And I'm like, wait, I've been home 3 hours. What?
Put you right back into rotation.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, there we go. It's time. But the more skills you build, the more knowledge you have, the more you can do, the more you're capable of. And if you're not making yourself capable, you're becoming dead weight to your community, to your family. You're making other people have to help take care of you. And the more you can learn and do and gain, the better you're going to be for your community. Because at the end of the day, like, we have to protect the communities that we love and know, and our friends and our neighbors. Like, we have to help rebuild. And if you can't help rebuild, what can you do? You've got to have something you can bring to the table. Utah Mike, 37 years he's been cooking for his family. Show off. Utah Mike's awesome. I love that dude. But like, guys, like everyone listening, like, what can you do to help your family? Get them prepared. Teach them the skills. Learn the skills and teach them the skills. Get started on your preparedness journey. Get focused on which things are going to be your big things that you got to worry about. We've got a little guide on our website in the download resources area that gives you, it's kind of a planning chart, what to focus on. What are my major issues? Yes, there's a section where you can put all the phone numbers of all the people that you need to contact if the phones are still on, right? If I'm worried more about an earthquake, start there. If I'm worried more about financial collapse, start there. And start listing all the different possible things that will affect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a one-day exercise. Like, do this for 30 days, and you're going to come up with a lot of different things that are going to affect you.
Yep.
And put it in a binder. Don't keep it on your laptop. Put it in a binder. Put the binder somewhere you're going to see it every day, and work on it and refine it. Maybe print off 2 or 3 copies of the stuff. But get to a position where you have a plan, you're working towards your goals, and you're always learning. And you're going to be a fantastic, ready-minded individual.
So even though Scott is a gateway drug, please don't say no to Scott. This is not one of those Nancy Reagan.
It's funny.
I would encourage you to go the other way. You know, just say yes.
I was brought in as a panelist for a preparedness training course. So the course I went to last night, I went to the course. Then afterwards, they had a VIP panelist session and had me as one of the speakers. And I was just like, okay, cool. And it was funny because they're like, oh, this is the guy that did PrepperCon. And this is held locally here in Utah. And about 80% of the people were like, oh, yeah, we know you. I knew you. And I'm just like, this is hilarious. And they called me a preparedness expert. I don't like that. I don't like being called the preparedness expert because there's a lot I don't know. And I like to be called the preparedness enthusiast because I like to get people excited about it. Yeah. And that's the best. Like getting people excited to prep, getting people emotionally bought into it is where you can have change. Mm-hmm. And I do the same. Like there's 2 topics that I get super amped about. That's 3 really. But number 1 is God. Build that relationship with him and he's going to direct you in the right path to go. And number 2, my family. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more important to my family and my growth of my family than to keep them safe and prepared. And to do that is prepping. And so I'm always talking about prepping because I know other people's families are important to them. And I want them to have their family better prepared and safer because no one else can provide you security better than you can provide your security. Even if you have no money, you can do a better job than anybody else can because you actually care. So go get prepped now.
Just say yes.
Just say yes to Scott and prepping.
Yep.
Whatever I ask. And what I'm going to ask you to do right now is to make sure you like and subscribe and you follow and you engage with this group. Get in our Facebook group if you're on Facebook. It's Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. Follow us on YouTube. We do our lives every Wednesday here on YouTube, as well as in our group and on our Facebook page. You could win 5 ounces of silver just by being part of that YouTube group.
We're getting closer.
If you're in our Facebook group and on the YouTube, there's 5 ounces of silver online and a Jace case, emergency medical antibiotics. Guys, these are things that are going to help you protect your family. They're going to help you eliminate the fears of prepping and eliminate the fears of the what ifs, right? It's going to resolve those. And you're going to know, okay, now here's what I do when things go sideways or when the feces hits the vertical oscillator, right? You'll know what to do. That's just a fancy way of saying the crap hits the fan.
Yeah.
You'll know what to do because you've got a plan and you've practiced the plan.
Sounds good.
This isn't just, we're not here for our health. We're here for your health. And as Witted Outdoors says, it is finger licking good. Guys, you've been listening. You've been part of the group. We appreciate you being here with us tonight in our live. This isn't just radio for the ready-minded. This is a podcast for the prepared. Get prepared now. Overcome your fears. Eliminate the worries. And man, you're going to have a much better, much more peaceful life. I promise.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. You've been watching Prepper Talk Radio and listening to wherever you are. Have an awesome day. We'll catch you on the next episode.
See you next week.
Take care, guys.